Okay, guys, welcome back to part two. This is actually the second time I'm shooting this because the first one was like an hour and 20 minutes long, and I don't think anyone wants to listen to me for that long, and I think it loses some of its value to put out a video that's so long that nobody can really track with it. So, let's jump in. So I want to talk to you really quickly about the land. Obviously, that's a key piece to this entire puzzle. One of the reasons for that is the landowner is not a true party of interest to these individual licenses. The same is true in Colorado, California, Florida, other parts of the world, where the owner of the land is allowed to make certain improvements and offer up expertise as well as assets that would make their job easier. For example, if you were a construction company and you were looking for a piece of land and you found one that actually had some heavy equipment as well as a gravel yard and all of these other resources for you, you may not have to look anywhere else. And then if that property was large enough that they could house multiple tenants, they could share in some of those resources and potentially drive down the cost of doing business, increase value, because they've got extended leases and asset and equipment rentals, things like that, that are incorporated into their lease that offer scaling opportunities. And because what we're doing is using Washington State as a beta test as to how we can scale this to a much larger enterprise, we thought this was the perfect opportunity. So in the around 2012, I went out and bought this very, very raw piece of land with a partner. Initially, they were a resource for me. I was able to use the capital that was designated for the license to do the things that we needed to do, pay for the things that we were required to pay for on our own. But the owner of the property was able to make certain improvements on the land. So I was able to make requests for buildings and do other things, and we would increase the lease accordingly. And it allowed the owner of the property to increase their revenue stream by adding to our revenue stream. And it wasn't a violation of the license. So this became a pivotal piece of our overall equation. And the reason we went for such a large plot of land, although there was no power, no buildings, no infrastructure, essentially it was just water, but it sit in a really nice spot, which if you were to look at the hydrochemistry tables, you can see that most of the water that's collected on our property is rainwater that ends up in a very large aquifer that's actually about 1,000 feet higher than all the wetland agriculture that surrounds us. So all of that water gets a lot of nitrates and runoff from these fertilizers at the wetland farms, so irrigated land. So by going up higher in elevation, one, we were on the same geographical plane that we had a lot of experience growing outside with. And then we also had enough land that we could expand. And I mean expand in a big way. So 250 acres is enough to house dozens and dozens of licenses, the largest of their kind, as well as potentially have a CBD farm or large processing and scaling facilities. So for us, it was a great target, but man, in the early days, it was rustic. There was no power. Like I said, there was water, but the crews were having to go down to my little vacation house down in town, cook their food, do their laundry, and then come back up for 2 or 3 days and just live without power. And we spent an entire summer out there just digging and building and getting ready for our first inspection. So once that license was established, I removed myself from the equation. It's a much longer story we'll get into at another time. But what we were able to do then is participate in the industry, but not violate what would eventually be the rules that we were anticipating having to operate under in the public sector, and or not put ourselves in a position where we are violating the rules of the LCB. So over the years, what we've done is drastically expand out there at the farm, and we've added infrastructure. We've added a lot of different licenses that were able to come to us and say, hey, what I need is a soft landing spot. I need a place where I've already got security cameras. Transferring licenses is very difficult. So when you do it, you have to have your old facility still current and the new one completed. And with cash flow problems, and a lot of these guys went out and spent millions of dollars trying to set up these large scale grow operations without a lot of experience, and then they started to fail, or the grower would leave or go to another farm, and they were left with these licenses that needed a landing spot. So we saw an opportunity, about 5 years ago to really start making these soft landing spots. And as because we have the land under our belt, we have the ability to go out and shop for for people that are looking for a soft landing spot. And what that does is allow them to tap into our existing infrastructure and resources and experience. And there has to be clear division between each of the licenses, but the assets that are on the farm can often be shared. So if you think about things like bulldozers, tractors, backhoes, these are all things that all of these farms need, but only for a short period of time, and then it's sitting on the farm. So in the early years, we had a small Kubota. It was wonderful, and it helped us build most of the first phase that we did out there, but we quickly ran into a point where it just was not sufficient. But going out and spending $100,000 on a giant tractor and backhoe didn't really make a lot of sense either. So we started to find that as we scale and we bring out more licenses, our ability to thoughtfully invest in assets, physical assets that could be used by all of the farms, would drive more revenue to our top line, but it would also create an attractive landing spot for these licenses, and it's proven to be true. So over the course of the years, of course, we've got a bulldozer, we've got tractors, we've got a backhoe, we've got a dump truck, we've got a flatbed, miscellaneous vehicles. The other thing is all of the containers and all of the pots and some of the stuff that's out there that you don't need year round becomes useful to share. Depending on when you plant, you need different size of pots. So we have thousands, and I mean tens of thousands of different grow containers and storage bins and resources out there that they can tap into, along with all of the physical machinery that they can use. The other thing to consider is trimming. It's a huge undertaking, but in outdoor grows, it's in a very short window of time. So having buildings where they can store and house this material, or at least facilities on each of these licenses where they can temporarily store drying flower, is something that's definitely needed. But the machinery to actually get it from the plant to a finished usable product is very expensive. So a good trimming machine, by the time you fully outfit it, can be $20,000 plus. So what we did is we went out and got what is my favorite machine, the Gladiator Titan. It's a double barrel monster of a machine that can just put in work. We got one of those. We have a satellite. We have a debutter, which is another really cool machine, as well as a Trim Pro rotor, which is just a bunch of different machines used to harvest material. But what we've done is created a system using those machines. So when you look at each one of those, functioning, it allows us to take down copious amounts of plants at a time and basically hand over that entire system to each individual license for them to use for a period of time. And as it moves through our facility, each of them is moving through waves of product that are drying in rotation. So what it allows us to do is set up a harvest schedule in partnership with the licenses that they schedule out when they would like to harvest. And we move the machinery through each of the licenses, allowing them to kind of tap into, $50, $60, $70,000 worth of equipment, as well as a system that's now, 12, 13 years old, that allows them to just come in and get it done. And when the product is done and dried, you've got another problem. How do you store all of it? So each one has a shipping container on their facility provided by us. Some of them with different levels of drying and curing capabilities. For example, Northwest Bakery Services, which is our largest tenant, has, you guys have probably seen the machine, or the room we built out for them. It is a solid cedar drying room that is specifically designed to dry large amounts of cannabis at a time. So we move a couple hundred pounds every few days through that facility. But then when it's dry, you've got to preserve it. So back to the same point. The nitrogen sealing machines, it's a $5,000, $10,000 unit. It also requires copious amounts of power and a little bit of know-how how to use it. So we were able to go out and secure one of those last year or the year before, and that allows us to go to each of these tenants and help them safely and securely harvest their product into storage containers that will stand the test of time. So 3-4 months down the line, the product's not worthless because it's been sitting in drying out in a plastic bin. So again, the nitrogen sealing and the process for doing so, what they're effectively doing is buying into a system that allows them to operate at a minimum because we're providing a lot of the resources and expertise for them. That comes at a cost to their lease and the rest of the equipment and service rentals, but by doing so, we're not violating the laws surrounding a true party of interest, but we are allowing ourselves to invest in the equipment and supplies and increase the revenue stream to our company. So we talked about physical assets, but then also you look at the farm, the security fencing, the cameras, all of that stuff needs upkeep and maintenance, and it's important that those things are in compliance, and it's actually a requirement of the lease that those things we provide are functioning so that they can stay current with the LCB or any regulatory body if we're talking about Colorado or any of the other states. Our system would allow for us to continually maintain those units and make sure that everything's up to snuff. Now, the consequence of that, of course, is there are frequent rule changes, which I've talked about many, many times, which requires us to constantly adapt and stay compliant, but that keeps us on our toes, and it also teaches us lessons that are applicable when scaling to other states. So some of the other things we have that I didn't really touch on much in past videos is, of course, extraction equipment and processes for how to extract the material. So when I keep harping on this being a system, it's in large part because it really is a system. The way we grow, the plants that we provide, or the plants that we originally provided genetics to some of these licenses in the early years are still in the system. So we know how the plant's going to grow, which is more important than having the best plant or the hottest strain of the year is how does that strain grow in our existing environment so that somebody's not going out and spending $40,000, $50,000 on clones only to find out that they don't grow well or they're not native to the area and just don't do well in this soil. So we've worked a lot of those kinks out. So we just make these turnkey operations for these licenses to come in and participate on our land, tap into our resources and scale. But then they've got another layer of opportunity, and that's what are you going to do with the product when it's done? It's their product. They're free to sell it as they wish, but they could also work with one of our other facilities to ensure that they've got access to the market. So they may put it in their own brands. Tange may want to sell Tange flower next year. Can't do anything about that. That's their choice. But one of the things that Tange is going to need to, or at least I would think they would want to do, is extract some of that material and find a partner who's willing to take it. In this situation, we already have brands that are going into the market using the same strains and the same protocols that they are for growing to ensure that we've got high quality material for the edibles and brands that go out under our suite of brands and services. So ideally, that product would be moved through the system in such a way that goes to market under our brands. That is the plan. There's very few people involved that don't see that vision and want to participate in that infrastructure. So what we've got beyond all of those things is physical equipment and extraction labs that are utilizing the practices that we see fit for our products. So when we send material out to another license, it's going to come back into the licensed facility the way that our brands require it as far as safety protocols are concerned, pesticides, all of the things that are included in kind of our guarantee with our Rick Simpson oil recipes. Those are not going to see any deviations from the plan. So the other licenses that are sending products out under our brands and services are at no risk of being in violation of our contracts or the expectation of quality when our product leaves the facility. So albeit it's their brand, it's their name on the line, it's their license, it is ultimately our brand that they're licensing. And if they don't uphold those standards, it becomes difficult for us to continue that relationship. So one of the things that guarantees some success across the platform is when you've got growers and processors that are working together using the same systems and the same protocols, there's not a lot of variation, which makes for easy scaling. So I've harped on this 1,000 times, but I'm going to say it one more time. Actually, this is not the last time I'm going to say it, but I'm going to say it again. We often get compared to other markets, and they'll look at it and say, okay, let's see what all the licenses are producing that are either licensing brands or intellectual property and get an idea of what's going to market. Well, we've had instances, and these are old numbers, but say 50,000 units are going out. If the average wholesale price is $1 a unit, that means there's 50,000 products going out and generating $50,000 in revenue for one of these licenses. We have a set fee that we can draw from that, but one of the things that we talk about often is if you look at the revenue stream from that, what we're more interested in is the amount of units being produced and our ability to scale that number and keep up with production from a supply side, really from all angles. That's really the test. You might look at a facility in Colorado and they say, wow, this edibles company out here is doing $300,000. Well, the problem is that's not $300,000 wholesale. They're vertically integrated. So the front of house is actually where they're tallying that up. So it might only be 12,000 units, but being sold at a factor of 5 or 6 over our wholesale market here in Washington because they own the retail stores as well. So the numbers don't always tell the story. What tells the story for me is the amount of product being manufactured in these facilities and their ability to work with us to scale operations so that we can build a nationally and globally recognized set of brands. So for us, when I talk about the system, I want to get to something that almost none of you are aware of, and it's one of the things we're most proud of. Our software system we've created, and it is the Sweet Nirvana Order Wizard is kind of the internal name for it. And what it allows us to do is keep a really close watch on all of the activities of multiple licenses across multiple platforms in multiple regions at the same time, and allow us as a company to predict what supplies we're going to need, what packaging we're going to need. I'm well aware those are supplies, but we talk about supplies on the side of the flour and oil need, as well as the packaging and resources. Some of that information the individual licenses need for their own purposes, and some of that we need so that we can be prepared based on their orders. So they're allowed to independently manage their own inventory, but what we get from a bird's eye view is how it all fits together. What it allows us to do is basically give us remote management of the different facilities, the different sales teams, production, fulfillment. It automatically tracks production time. So you think about how long something's in the system as it moves through. We're able to get an idea of which license is actually performing at a high level, which one is starting to struggle with backlogs, whether or not the sales team is out ahead of the production capabilities. We're able to get a bird's eye view of how all of that functions. And you can only imagine what half a decade now of this information is worth to us, because we know what the consumers are buying, we know what the buyers at the stores are requesting, and how long it's taking us to fulfill those requests based off of thousands of variables. So when you go out and you're an investor and you're looking at these, and I've advised a lot of money in this game over the years, they look at these companies and go, wow, really killer branding, really great story. They've got a Jake George who seems to know a lot about cannabis and what it takes to build a company in this space and what it takes to build a brand. But then when you go beyond that, what's missing is all of the information that tells you whether or not you've got a hit on your hands, whether or not you're going to be able to scale and grow this business. I'm more interested in what GreenLink looks like in 2 years than I am what it looks like today. And the reason for that is because the climate is changing so fast. There's nobody that's ready for what it looks like in 2 years. The best we can do is gather as much information as humanly possible and prepare ourselves for what a federally rescheduled scenario looks like, or a fully legalized scenario. And I get that it's important we learn how to live given the rules we have now. I think that's probably one of my biggest specialties. But what's really going to send this to the stratosphere, what's going to reshape the entire industry, is what it looks like under a federal rescheduling or a full-on legalization. And what we want to do, and what we're going to do very, very well, is work with our existing partners. If it's allowed that we could effectively buy or buy into those licenses, we will. If we can bring all of this infrastructure into one house, it would be a monster of a company. So despite the fact that we're broken up and GreenLink does not own and control all of these individual pieces, what we have done masterfully is created a roadmap as to how they work together and gathered that information to build strategies into the future, which is what the next video is going to be about. But I think it's important that you understand that these assets and tools and all of the investment we've made, which is really millions of dollars since the beginning of this, it's really to drive information into our sphere so we know how to build a company that can take over the industry at scale. So I'm excited about all the things we're doing. I hope that you enjoyed getting a chance to look at a lot of these different assets. And I don't think many of you care whether or not we have a brand new dozer or a 10-year-old dozer or what the color the backhoe is. I don't think any of that really matters to you. What really should matter is that we have been doing the work and preparing for scaling and getting ready for an entirely different infrastructure that is hard to imagine what it'll look like. It really is. I think that based on some of the things we've been seeing from some of the political candidates and some of the challengers heading into this presidential election, it looks like Kamala Harris has committed that they would reschedule cannabis or decriminalize it in their first term. I think Trump may make a move to try and counter that argument, which would greatly benefit us. If not, we'll sit back and wait and see. We can't control that. I don't want to get into what if, but I will say, when there is a rescheduling, we are going to be in a prime position to be one of the largest players in the space. I don't care about what's going on in Canada. I'm not worried about any of those marketing activities, any of the trouble that they've had getting up and off the ground, because we've gone about it completely differently. We built real brands, real companies, partnered with existing infrastructure. Many of those I built myself, and we've got a team of 20, 30 people that are spending all of their days gathering this information and building out platforms for the future. I think at the end of the day, we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity on our hands. I think our team, I'd put them up against anybody. I think that you're always going to have misses, you're always going to have challenges, but the thing we've been doing is almost to a fault focusing on building this infrastructure. I hear people chipping away at me all the time talking as if I don't understand what a caveat emptor does to a pink sheet stock. I don't plan on living in that world for very long, and I don't anticipate that we're going to have to. The process of getting ready and making sure that we're ready for the big show requires that I prioritize things sometimes. And taking advantage of the opportunities that are right in front of us here in the Pacific Northwest, as well as other regions around the country, are very important. I will say this, there are some technological developments around the cannabis plant that play right into our expertise and allow us to partner with major players in a couple of big industries. I don't have anything definitive to say yet or anything that I feel comfortable sharing at this point, but we are so close with some breakthrough technology that I think it's going to lead to some very interesting developments in the coming months. So please understand, we are 100% committed to this. We've got a large team, a team of experts. We've got people that have been securities attorneys for 35 plus years, advising me step by step. The transfer agent has been wonderful, helping me navigate some difficult issues with the share issuance side. We're getting all of that cleaned up. I think you're going to get a lot more of that information in this last installment, which will be the third video, where we're actually going to go through where we're at with each of these things, look at the actual revenue streams, look at where we're going to be in the coming years and how it all fits together. And we're going to set some hard deadlines and expectations on our accounting teams, our legal team, as well as myself, and getting everything ready to go for the OTC so that we can get to the next step. I don't anticipate staying at that phase very long. I want to reiterate that. This is going to happen fast and furious, but I need you guys to be patient with us and with me, and just recognize that we are going to continue to have this dialogue. We're going to have an open conversation, but in the next video, you're going to see a considerable amount of information that you've been waiting for. So I'm excited to share that with you. I don't mean to be a tease, but just take a look at everything we've done in the body of work. I think as you get more and more comfortable with us and the things we're doing and have more access to it, it's only going to drive more interest. It's only going to drive more excitement. So I appreciate you being along for the ride. Also, I'd mentioned last time, we'd set up greenlink_corporate on Instagram. It's just getting underway. I've instructed all the social media teams to start tagging, and the licenses that are operating in different regions to start tagging that account so that I can reshare information with you quickly. Stuff that's easy to digest and keeps you abreast to the things that are going on. So again, that's Instagram. I've got it all posted here. So go ahead and follow the link if you want. It's a new account, but it'll also help point you to some of the other accounts because you'll see the other stuff that's tagged. So I'm going to try and use that as a collection net for updates and information as they go. Of course, Twitter, we're going to keep firing away on that. I think Matt and the team are doing a great job of making sure there are updates consistently. And let's just keep this rolling. So my hope is the next video will probably be out 2 weeks from now, but I'm excited for you to see that. That's where the meat and potatoes are going to start hitting the plate. So I'm excited. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me, letting me ramble for a few minutes. Hopefully this shorter condensed version will be a little more palatable for you guys. So anyway, have a great day. I look forward to catching up with you in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.